Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Thank you for joining us again today. Technology is an essential part of any modern business. Like it or loathe it, it's unavoidable. My guest today has made a career in multiple different industries of turning around businesses, helping to identify and improve their utilization of technology. And he calls himself the Technomancer, which I have to say is a very cool word and really like it. His name is Ross Shott, and we're going to be talking today about all things leadership and technology and wherever the two shall meet.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Well, let me begin by saying thank you, Ross, so much for joining me on quite an early morning, I'm guessing, because you're in Texas, I think.
Yeah, not too bad. About 7:30 a.m.
Okay, yeah, not bad. That's about time for my first coffee when I get up at that time of day. So. First of many. And he's holding one up, listeners, for those of you who can't see the video. So I think a great place to start then is for you to give us a little bit of background about yourself, your career history, what you get up today, and what gets you out of bed in the morning, really.
Yeah, so that last question, so I probably would want to start first, but we'll go with the old bio. So I basically got out of high school, went in the military. I did my education much later, but after my military time, I actually did my first turnaround. I went to a manufacturing division of a company, did a turnaround there, and fell into doing more turnarounds. So I used to go to companies that were failing and try to help turn things around. Was pretty successful with that. Did a few startups, did my own startup and exit of a retail business, and then did a couple other startups later. And then basically got senior roles in different companies and found some really great relationships and leaders to work with and talk to. And so my career just kind of took from there. And then recently during the pandemic, I thought I'd put all of my understanding of technology into some writing that I could share with other people. And, and then do podcasts like this to try to help share that knowledge and spread that around.
Quite a varied career then, fair to say.
Across a lot of industries. So, I don't know that there's an industry that I didn't touch at some point during my career, and probably not too many technologies that I didn't touch. So that's why, I kind of coined, called myself the Technomancer, someone that can work magic with technology. I kind of stole that from science fiction.
Yeah, I like it, I must say. And what got you, what was your first kind of toe in the water with technology, I guess?
So, I worked on nuclear warheads for the Air Force. So I guess you could argue that was my first real, experience with, sophisticated technology. The military was using pretty leading edge stuff. I can't talk a whole lot about most of that, but, although that's probably, it's old now. That was, 40 years ago. So I'm sure that technology has changed some. So that was kind of my first experience with just generally with technology and also with leadership, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. But beyond that, when I did the first turnaround, I was fortunate enough to go to a company that was working with the Deming organization. W. Edwards Deming was the one that taught total quality management initially to the Japanese because Americans wouldn't listen to him. And then came back when the Japanese had great success and came back to America and started teaching American companies. And the company I went to work with was actually working with him. And so it was a combination of working with, total quality management and, working in a company that was really struggling and losing money. And just looking at how they were using their technology and just reapplying it, really. We didn't invest in a whole lot of new technology at the time. Obviously, we're losing money. We couldn't afford to do that. And so it was really the combination of those two things. And they're almost intermarried even today, process improvement and technology. But that was kind of my first taste of it. And the success was just crazy. And so, that from there, I just always kind of had a passion for it. And then I spent about a decade in Silicon Valley, more recently working on, looking at leading edge technologies and things that were out there. And in between, just worked with a lot of different companies and saw the value of applying technology.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, nuclear warheads, interesting indeed.
Yeah, it's not an everyday job, right?
No, absolutely. That's certainly an unusual one. These days, when people say technology and when they talk about tech, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about software.
Right.
But presumably, you've worked on the other type of technology, the other types, I guess. So when we say that word tech, what do you think that actually means?
So I use 3 categories. I think they're generally accepted kind of categories of thinking about it: hardware, software, and wetware. And wetware is brains, talent, your people. And sometimes I classify, if you're outsourcing something like marketing or IT support or something like that, I still classify that as wetware, because it's not really hardware or software that's in your company. It's intelligence that's outside of your company doing things for you. So I usually classify them in those 3 categories. And hardware can be anything from computers, routers, your network, machinery, anything that you're using to, kind of run your business or manufacture your products, etc. Software, obviously, more administrative related, although, for some things, running CNC machines and so forth, that's software based. ERP systems, CRM systems, those kind of things. And then when I talk about talent, that's one of the kind of places that I think is very, very highly overlooked in most companies. They don't spend a lot of time, working with their people on their technology skills. Leading edge companies, yes, but most other companies, not so much.
Development of people, full stop, not just around the tech skills. I think I guess a lot of hiring managers, it's too easy to just put that requirement on the job spec, isn't it? And just find someone who's already got it rather than...
Yeah, and that's the people that even do that. I mean, most of the time they look at other job skills related to, if you're going to work in accounting, you want to know your accounting skills. Maybe they'll ask if you understand QuickBooks or whatever other accounting software that they're using. But for general administrative personnel or other people that do service work, things like that, they don't tend to focus on what are your technology skills. You'll see something like, do you understand Office or, things like that. But, generally they don't, really dig in deep on how tech savvy is this person. And I think that's a huge mistake, which again, we'll probably get to it at some point in the conversation. But, it's a big weakness.
No, I do agree with you. I think just training in general, really. Certainly doing what we do as well. Don't know what your experience has been, but I do find it quite difficult to persuade managers to invest in their staff for leadership training when they're not leaders yet, which to me is the time to do it.
Right. There's what's that old joke? The CEO says we need to invest in our people and in their training, and train them really well. And he's like, well, what? And the CFO is like, well, if we put all this money into our people and they leave, what are we going to do? And he says, well, what if we don't and they stay? So it's a catch-22. So you got to take a pick, right? Make your choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And okay, last tangent question then. We're seeing obviously loads in the news all over social media lately about ChatGPT and AI. That's the big news in tech right now. What do you think about it? Is it coming for our jobs?
I love that question. Yes and no. So I'm going to, yes, it's coming for our jobs, but it's not going to reduce the number of jobs. So I like to bring up the point that every technology and every advance that we've had so far has come from people's jobs. That's for sure. And those jobs have changed, but the sheer number of jobs has actually increased over the decades. It doesn't matter whether we had process improvement, offshoring, outsourcing, immigration, automation, robotics, computers, the internet, all of these things have come into play. But if you look since the 1960s, every decade, the number of jobs per capita has actually increased, across the spectrum, mostly the developed world. And I can't argue, I can't speak to the developing world because I don't have those numbers, but, at least for sure in America, there are more jobs per person today than there were 60 years ago, even though we've had all these advances. Now the jobs have changed for sure. So to answer for sure your question is true. The ChatGPT is going to take some jobs for sure, but it's also going to create a lot of opportunity for people to start businesses, make money, do freelance work, increase their job skills in a certain area that will be able to support ChatGPT. Education is going to have to change more to a query based as opposed to memorization based, creative kind of things. So it'll still be there.
I have to say that is a really good way of looking at it. Because I think there's too many people on there, and we see it now with ChatGPT. We saw it a few decades back with factory automation and things like that.
Yeah.
And people just, it's the old kind of throw the spanner in the works, invention of sabotage to protect their job sort of thing. And it's totally the wrong way to look at it. It's, as you say, it's going to create opportunities. It's going to create more jobs. It's not going to, in the long run, take anything away. So yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, a lot of these like large Fortune 500 companies, they're worried about, skills obsolescence. So a certain number of the, people in their organization, their skills become obsolete over time. That's just a natural, cycle that every company and every age kind of goes through. So it's no different now. We just have to find ways to reskill those individuals into some other, higher tier capabilities that can be used somewhere else in the company or somewhere else in, their career path.
Yeah, I guess the big change really is how frequently that cycle repeats now compared to a few hundred years ago, maybe.
Correct. Yeah, things seem to be accelerating the pace of that change. So, maybe where it was a decade or 2 decades before, now it's maybe coming every 3 to 5 years or less. Product development certainly has shrunk to an extremely short cycle time compared to the past.
Scary, but exciting as well.
Yeah. Just got to be flexible. That's the new.
Absolutely. Well, we've been sort of circling around this question. Let's ask it anyway, just to get the definitive answer, if you like. Why is technology so important in business?
So I love there's a line in Jim Collins, for those that have read Good to Great, when he talks about technology. Good to Great was about, they investigated all the good to great companies that had outperformed the market decade after decade after decade. And one of the things that he said was they used technology as an accelerator. And he asked the question, how do those who build great companies, use technology? And I changed that and added the word today. How do those who build great companies think about technology today? And it's changed. A startup today has technology at the beginning. Every company uses layers of technology. I'm not really sure I know of a company that doesn't use some form of technology, or many layers of technology. So technology is more pervasive these days. It's changing faster. It's more necessary to use your business, to leverage the promise of technology. And without it, you're almost dead in the water. You really need the promise of technology, as I talk about it, is speed, leverage, and predictability. Do things faster, do more with less, and do it right more frequently. Computers and machinery are not perfect, but they are much more error-less than humans. So offloading tasks to, computers and machines that can do that repetitive stuff over and over again, right, correctly each time, is just the way, the kind of a business has to go these days. And the statistics bear this out. Companies that really leverage their technology well are 3 times more likely to lead their competition. They're, going to get double the return on assets of, the average company or regular companies. So, the money is there to be had. And I think there's a lot of money being left on the table right now because of, companies not, performing well with their technology or not properly utilizing it.
If we think about the average company, if there is such a thing, how well do you think most businesses are utilizing their technology right now?
Yeah, by my estimation, I say it's about 40%. And the reason I say that is if you have a technology and you're leveraging it poorly or just average, 50, 60%, and then that technology is leveraging up against other technology, and that's leveraging against other technology and against people, and all of those are just using a portion of their capability. That's a lot of, potential speed, leverage, and predictability that's being left on the table and being missed. I have some, in my book, I have some very, sophisticated ways to kind of measure that. But, just as a general rule, I would say it's about 40%. And that's from the work that I've done so far. And, there's some paper napkin calculation you could do if you wanted to really kind of do something simple and think about it that way. And that one's based just solely on your people, right? Like if you think about it, if you have 10 users of a technology, I ask the question, out of those 10 users, how many are power users? So let's say on a 1 to 10, a 1 is they're lost. They have no idea what the technology even is. And a 10 is they're so good at it, they could onboard and sell other companies the product, or sell other companies the product and onboard them. And most companies are going to say, oh, out of those 10 employees, most of them are probably a 5. They might have a 6, a 7, or an 8, somebody. But that means that, the majority of the people that are using your technology are average. So you're getting average capability at best. Even if you have one person who's pretty good on it, they're not leveraging it for your whole company typically. So, it's just not being used well. There's lots of other reasons why companies are performing poorly with the technology. There's probably 10 major, basic reasons, but
I'm actually surprised it's as high as 40%.
Are you?
Maybe that tells you a little bit about my own experiences of trying to implement software in a business. But
yeah, it's hard. I was doing a strategic session with a company doing about 700 million, and their COO and their director of operations and a couple other people were in there, and I asked them, they were talking about the software that was running a lot of their machinery and their automation and so forth. And I asked them, I said, what percentage of that capability of that, automation are you using? And they said 29%. And I was shocked. I mean, that was probably one of the most eye-opening moments I've had around technology, is when a company of that size says they're only getting about 29% of the capability out of their technology. And they had measured it, so they knew. Just kind of shocking, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to tell tales, but my particular experience there was it was sort of a CRM, but also for project management tracking as well. One of the things it could do, which a lot of these softwares do, is you could see who in the business was logging in and how frequently. And based on that, we had about 10% of people in the company were actually using it.
Yeah.
And that was 3 months after we'd implemented it as well. So
yeah, that 90-day window is really tough. People hate change. People are very resistant to change. So usually if they can resist for about 90 days, either the company will forget about it, or they'll get by without it, or they'll resist it so hard that the company gives up and just abandons the change initiative or the software or whatever. But yeah, I've almost paid for a lot of engagements. Companies have paid for a lot of engagements by just dropping software that they were paying for that no one was using, or software or hardware or other things that they had in place that had been obsolete for some period of time, but because of the change in personnel and other things, they just never really took a look at it. And, just the savings that they got from some of those things. Now that's the low hanging fruit. That's not the reality of how you really, get that promise of technology and get the returns that you're looking for. That's really about how do you leverage the technology and so forth. But, sometimes just stop paying for things that you shouldn't be paying for is enough to pay for, having me come in and look at what you're doing.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, particularly with that example, I mean, the relative percentage compared to turnover that was being spent on software that wasn't being used. I mean, it's a few years back now, so I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it was pretty high percentage, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, comparable to what they were paying to rent the office, for example.
Yeah.
Anyway.
On average, I'd say a lot of companies will save a few grand, a few thousand a month, if they just clean up what they're paying for that they're not really using, or consolidate some of their technologies. And I'm not saying they have to invest in a lot of, other new technology. Most of what we do is really around how do you leverage what you have? How do you get the performance that, this really kind of started, I've interacted with, thousands of CEOs over the past couple of decades. And one of the common complaints was they paid for technology and these people, and they're putting all this money into this business, and they're just not getting the results that they want. And it really started to kind of stick out to me that, it was their ability to leverage the technology that was the main sticking point, the main challenge. And that's kind of what led me on this path to kind of consolidate my thinking around this from the past 40 years of working with technology and lots of different types of businesses and industries.
Yeah, and you mentioned change management earlier, and obviously that's a key component of implementing any new system. And clearly, in my previous experience, I was doing it the wrong way, and that's no doubt partly why it didn't work. But then we also spoke earlier about the importance of the staff and the people side of that, and I guess it all comes together as three components of the same system, really, doesn't it? If you want to successfully implement new tech, you've got to do all of those. You can't just try and, as you say, buy it and throw it at people and expect them to use it.
Right. Yeah, the way I like to think about it is think of strategy, tactics, and what I call heuristics. So strategy obviously is, are you really thinking about the technologies that you're using? What's the future technologies you want to implement? Are you using it fully across your business? In your industry? Are you watching other, competitors? What are they using? Are you looking at other industries to see what they're using that might, impact your industry? Because most of the disruption comes from outside of your normal purview, where you're watching or where you're looking. So that's kind of the strategic part of it. Are you really leveraging the technology fully in your business? And then at the tactical level, that really is what you were just talking about, the kind of the process improvement kind of space. Are we, really have we got the right implementation of these technologies with each other so that they're compatible and they're leveraged well? Are we managing our workflows with the technology and really leveraging the full capability of this technology and not just layering technology onto bad workflows? Are we collecting data around these, not only the outcomes of the technology or the process, but also the process itself? Are we improving the use of the technology or the process to get the best out of it? And then the last layer, the kind of the heuristic level, is heuristics means rule of thumb. And I kind of explain it like in psychology, the research says that the average person makes between 3,000 and 35,000 decisions a day. That sounds kind of like a crazy number, but that's all your subconscious decisions, moment to moment, things you don't even think about. Most of that's subconscious. So if we take the most conservative number, we say 3,000, and we go even more conservative and say only 10% of those are work related. That still means that every person in your company is making about 300 decisions a day that are mostly subconscious. They're just automatic. They're on autopilot. And these are just based from previous experience or, rules of thumb that they use to live by. And I'll give you an example. Let's say at the front office, we're using quality as our go-to-market strategy. It's all about quality. We're quality, quality, quality. But by the time that gets to the front line, my boss, my supervisor is always talking about we're behind schedule, we're over budget. We really got to get these pens. Let's say we manufacture pens. We really got to get these pens out the door. I'm on the front line and this pen comes by and it's kind of a wonky blue color. It's not our branded blue. The branding is off, the blue is off, but it's still a pen. I mean, it still works. It's okay. Do I think about the quality thing that the front office is talking about, or do I think about, my boss? If I take this pen off, that's going to cost us a lot in resources and money and time and rework. Do I take the pen off, or it's a pen, it still works? Do I just let it go? And I think you'll agree, most people just let it go. Now, if I don't hear anything, if no customer calls and complains, but I never hear the complaint, no one ever brings it up to me about this wonky blue pen, what do you think happens the next time the wonky blue pen comes down the assembly line? I don't even think about it. Yeah, I don't even think about it. The first time I encountered it, I thought about it. But now I don't even think about it. I just let it go because that's my new rule of thumb. That's my new heuristic, right? So when it comes to a company's technology, they really have to manage those heuristics, really have to train their people well on the technology, have to be very clear about what they want. They have to build a culture of tech savviness, hire for tech savviness. People nowadays want to know that they're working with the best technology, not the best. They want to know that they're at least working with good, solid technology and processes because they know it's less frustrating. Technology, I think most of us have a love-hate relationship with technology because when it's not working, it is the most frustrating thing imaginable. And when it does work, it's like magic. Hence my joke about the technomancer, right? Yeah. So, this is one of the things that I think companies just have to really spend a little more time focusing on, making sure their culture is about really leveraging their technology, hiring people that are fascinated or enjoy working with technology and know the value of it in their job. And that, those three tiers, strategies, tactics, and heuristics, I think is one way of kind of looking at the whole picture.
I like it. And it's kind of preempted the next question, which was about what leaders can do to help their teams make the best use of technology and what they can do to use that tech to lead better as well.
Yeah. So I kind of think of it in three kind of pieces, right? The first thing is a lot of companies audit their technology, but they just audit it from a tax standpoint or an asset standpoint. What do we have? And maybe they only do hardware, maybe they'll do some software, but most of the time it's hardware. So I would say, really audit what you have in terms of hardware, software, and wetware, and really evaluate how well are you using it and how much, work have you put into making sure it's being leveraged properly and it's delivering on the value that you want. And then at the next layer is, how well have we, integrated these things into our processes and how fully are we, leveraging those things together. And how well have we trained our people? Have we really put time and energy? Because, my thinking is if, the top 3 to 5, technologies that really drive your business, those top 3 to 5 technologies, you should have at least 2 power users in each of those technologies. Could be the same person, but, and somebody who understands your business. One of the 2, at least, should really understand your business model. And the reason I say that is, how could you possibly fully leverage a technology if no one in your organization really understands what it's capable of doing? And even if they do understand how capable it is, if they don't understand your business and, how do you make the best decisions? How do they contribute to helping make those best decisions in a group conversation? So that's kind of, some of the easy ways to kind of think about it. One is really to audit what you're paying for, what you're doing in a deeper way. And then, think about those things, work on, making some changes and taking some actions on them, and then really training your people and thinking and talking about technology on a regular basis. And there's a way. I have a simple assessment that you can kind of ask about 10 questions and really kind of get a gauge as to where we are. How do you benchmark where you're at? And that's the other thing I would say is assess at the beginning where you are, benchmark it, and then go through your audit, and then go through your work on your top 3 to 5 technologies to make sure you have solid, capable people working on it, using it. And those 3 things will probably get you a long way. I have a chapter of a book coming out, or just published now, just came out, but it kind of goes through those, the assessment, the audit, and then the scorecarding of those pieces. So you could easily look at that and kind of make a lot of positive movement on your own.
And so you have a methodology, I guess you'd call it, called technology momentum. Is this what you've been describing, or is there more?
Yeah, essentially, right. Yeah. So if you think about, again, kind of going back to Good to Great, his ideas were a lot about, if you do these things, make these incremental changes, you kind of get your business moving, and get that momentum of your business going. So I kind of use that kind of concept of technology momentum, which is as you fix various technologies, they start to leverage against each other, and you eventually start getting an exponential return on it. Again, kind of the whole snowball effect, right? As it rolls downhill and you pick up a little here, pick up a little there, and pretty soon, it's flying, and you're kind of surprised at it. It's a little slow at first, but then the acceleration is crazy.
Which I'm guessing is what makes that method so powerful and such an attractive idea.
Yeah, I think, I joke that, it's what I talk about is common sense. It's just not common practice. Oh. So I cover, 9 or 10 different areas in there. Usually they're the 10 big areas where companies make mistakes with their technology. And it's addressing each of those and going through how do you fix this and how do you fix that. And as you do each of those things, each of them gives their own return. But the leveraging them all together, doing all of those things is really where the power comes and the exponential returns come.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. I look forward to getting a copy of that, I must say.
Yeah, I'll send you one. I'll send you one after it comes out. When it comes out, I'll send you one. Don't worry.
That'd be very kind. Appreciate that. Are you a new leader, or do you aspire to be one? Do you want to take your skills to the next level and join a community of like-minded professionals? If so, then check out Integrity Leaders, our exclusive leadership program that offers you access to an online community platform and app, group virtual sessions on leadership once a month, as well as Q&As and access to a few top resources. You'll also get early access to our weekly podcast episodes. By joining Integrity Leaders, not only will you be able to enhance your own leadership abilities and make yourself a better manager, but you'll also be supporting this podcast and helping to keep it free for everyone. So visit the website today. It's www.leadernotaboss.com and start your journey towards becoming an exceptional leader. Let's get back to this episode. What is the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned from your varied career so far?
Yeah. So when I was in the military, I was what they call a fast burner, which meant I made rank really quickly. Usually your initial ranks are based on how long you're in. There's nothing you can do about that. But over time, you start to get into the ranks where you test for rank. And if you test well and do well with your performance evaluations, you can make rank quicker than, some other individuals. Well, at one point in time, I ended up making ranks so fast that not only was I managing my peers, but I was also supervising some of the people that I used to work for. And a couple months into this, I was miserable. And it was just not it was not working. So I have, every organization has that truth teller. So I called mine over and I said, hey, Troy, can you help me out on this? I said, I got a question for you. I said, I don't know what's going on. Our morale is down. Our productivity is down. My relationship with the guys and the crew is down. These are the people that I lived with, worked with, used to party with. Everything used to be so great here. And now it's just not doing well. Am I being sensitive, or am I missing something, or am I just, crazy? And I don't know. And he looked at me and he said, well, Ross, ever since you made rank, you've become a real asshole. And I said, thank you, Troy. And I walked away. Didn't even know what to say. Thank you, Troy was all I could think of, right? So I walked away. And it was a Friday afternoon. I went home and I thought about it all night, so much so that I couldn't sleep. And it wasn't until about Saturday afternoon at 4:00 in the afternoon that I finally accepted he was right. I had really went about it the wrong way. That sudden leadership role just collapsed, right? Did a poor job of it, went to my head. So I finally slept, and Sunday I got up and I started to make a list of all the leaders I'd experienced in my life, whether it was someone like coaching sports or, when I was working at jobs, through high school or whatever, through school. And my early time in the military, I started thinking about qualities of those various leaders that I really liked, and even people that I read about, Teddy Roosevelt and others. And I started making this list of qualities of those leaders that I really liked. And I went back to work on Monday. We usually had a launch meeting, early Monday morning for about 15 minutes. The whole crew was there, maybe 8,500 and something people. And I looked at them and I said, look, I want to apologize. I went about this the wrong way. That's not the kind of leader that I want to be. And I listed out this list of qualities that I had made. And I said, this is the kind of leader that I would like to be. Would you give me a second chance? And they did. And we really turned things around, ended up getting put in for a service award. And that was really the most valuable lesson I ever received in terms of leadership. And I do an exercise even now, even to this day, 40 years later, that helps kind of people think through that. What are those qualities, that you want to emulate as a leader? And they vary, they shift depending on the project, depending on the person, depending on, the company, the situation. That's why if you go on, Amazon or something and you search for leadership, you're going to find 150,000 books on leadership because it's just so malleable. It has to be kind of a little bit free flowing. I mean, I love your word integrity because I think that almost fits to every leadership characteristic, list. But, there are other aspects of leadership that kind of have to be flexible and have to be, more prevalent during different times than other times, So that was my most valuable lesson, and it was a good one. So I completely changed the dynamic of how I work with people from there on.
Yeah, it's a great one, I think, not just a good one. It's funny, the 150,000 different books on leadership, and I bet each one has a different view of what leadership is as well.
Yeah, they all got their little spin to it, right? And you can't say that any of them are necessarily wrong. There's just again, so many different scenarios and situations, which is why you have to just learn a lot, think a lot, have some, solid characteristics for yourself that you feel work, and then figure out each situation. Obviously our job as leaders is to make good decisions. That also involves how do we lead at any given time.
Indeed. And I think that what I particularly like about your story is, first of all, that you actually bothered to ask the question, because I think quite a lot of leaders in that situation potentially wouldn't. And if they did ask it, they wouldn't necessarily seek out the truth teller. They'd get one of the yes men or the yes women because they want to validate their own decisions, right?
Right.
And then the second thing, which I like as well, is that having got the truthful answer, you then reflected on it and did something about it. And I think those three aspects are so important for leadership development and having that self-awareness piece as well. It's, really, really love that story.
Well, thanks. I think it was, at least it was valuable for me, and I hope it's valuable for at least one other listener,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Okay. So next question, what do you think is the single most important thing that any leader can do?
we kind of touched on it. I think it's develop your people. I feel like most leaders, you have two roles. The two main things you need to do is make good decisions, and the other one is develop your people. I think a lot of times leaders get into a position and then they're protective of their position. I try to get into a position and think, who's my replacement? And the reason I think that is because, one, how am I going to go on and do something else if I'm stuck in doing this one thing or this one area of work, right? I can't move up. I can't move laterally. I can't find other projects. I can't create more value. If I'm stuck doing all the things I'm doing today, I can't do what needs to be done next. And so I try to think, who's my replacement? Now, maybe that means entirely who's going to take on this role when I move on or get, change jobs or promotion or whatever, at least in the past. But also who's going to take on this particular aspect of my job or my role, or as we grow, who's going to take on this new capacity, and that allows me to really think about, how do I invest in my people? How do I think about, the future of the business and the company? And that too is kind of related to making good decisions, but I think developing your people can't be underestimated.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's a fine balance, isn't there? And I think many people, I certainly did it in the past, will go to the wrong extreme of either one of those, because on the one hand, there's like, well, if there's someone else who can do my job, what's my value?
Right.
And you have to be able to kind of face that. And then there's the other aspect of, well, if no one else can do my job, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what happens to the business? Right. And so, you've got to walk that line. You've got to be able to face both of those possibilities, haven't you? And it's,
and unfortunately, especially at like the middle manager layer, I've done some leadership talks. Let's say we have 100 leaders in the room, and I'll ask the question, excluding your current supervisor, if they're in the room, how many of you have worked for an amazing manager, amazing, leader, mentor, someone, good decision maker, and you might see 5 or 6 hands out of 100. Then I'll ask the same question, excluding your current supervisor, if they're in the room, how many have worked for a poor manager, just a bad decision maker, poor leader, poor mentor? And almost everyone puts their hand up. And I think that's why poor leadership perpetuates itself, especially again at the middle management layer, because there's not enough investment in them, and not enough, good role models, good mentors, good training. Those things just don't seem to happen as often as they probably are needed in most companies. And most people get to those middle management layers by sheer default. Oh, I was the first person in the IT department when we were small, and now we got 75 people. That's probably an exaggeration, but you get the idea. 5 people, and I'm the leader of 4 other IT people, and I've never led people in my entire life. So that's kind of the way that those typically will happen, and it's just not healthy, for most organizations to not spend their time and invest their energy in those middle management layers.
Yeah. Apologies, listeners, if you can hear background noise. The rain is literally trying to batter through the window that I'm standing next to. Hopefully the noise cancellation will catch it and we'll be fine. But
I'm not hearing it on my end, so I think you're good.
Awesome. Yeah. So, there's a lot to unpack in that one, isn't there? And I think there's some human nature aspects in there as well. Like, I think it's like customer feedback, isn't it? People are much more likely to complain than they are to compliment good service. And I think the same sort of phenomena applies to good or bad managers. Like, if you think you've had a bad manager, you're going to shout about it forever.
Right.
Whereas if you've had a good one, you might mention it if you're specifically asked that question.
Right.
But a lot of people won't say it. And then equally, another aspect of human nature, I think, is there's the sort of, well, I would do it better thing, isn't there? Like, right. I think my manager's rubbish because if that were me, I would do it differently. And perhaps there's a bias there. But anyway.
No, that's true. That's true. It's very common for people to do the opposite of whatever their bad manager did. And I'm pretty sure even a bad manager, not everything they did was wrong. So if you go the opposite of everything they did, well, then you might be in put yourself in a rough situation as well as a leader. So.
Good point. And I think a lot of the bad managers get that reputation because of a few isolated examples of doing the wrong thing, whatever that might be. And then they get sort of painted as bad manager for forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, people talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
If one person in the company says this or voices that opinion, everyone's easy to jump in on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Okay. What then has been your own best experience of being led?
So I probably, up to this point in my career, I'd probably have to say Peter Diamandis. I worked with him. He's pretty famous. So if you wanted to look him up, he's not hard to find. I think Peter was a pretty amazing leader. He had a lot going on, multiple companies, worked at a very high level with lots of people. But when he was talking with you, he was present. And one of the few things that he did that would probably drive most people crazy, but when you learn Peter, you were accepted, is he would always look at his phone when he got text messages or phone calls or whatever when he was talking to you, but he never left the conversation. He was still able to be in the conversation. And the funny thing is you knew if you were the one that was texting or calling and needed something urgently, you knew that no matter what he was doing, he would get back to you right away. So you were really never waiting on a decision from Peter. You were never waiting. He was not usually a bottleneck to anything going on. He was a really driven, again, really present in conversations, deeply cared and passionate about his businesses and his people. So I think, no leader has all the perfect qualities, none that I've met anyway. But that was probably my best experience, learning from somebody at his level and his caliber, doing as much right as I've seen done by, in my career anyway. I've seen him speak probably somewhere between 35 and 50 times at this point, and every time he gets on stage, I want to be in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a very unique capacity to multitask as well. There's not many people who can, especially in this day and age,
I know,
concentrate on the phone and the conversation at the same time.
And I'm usually one to say multitasking is terribly inefficient. It's only good at in a live event or an active kind of scenario where you have to multitask. It's fine, but generally working at your desk, working on a project, multitasking is terribly inefficient.
Yeah, and this example in particular, I would say is the least efficient of all of those, like talking and texting.
Oh, yes. Our brains don't have multiple channels. We might have multiple personalities in there, multiple voices in our head, but for some reason they don't listen well.
Yeah. What advice would you give a first-time business founder who's just starting their first company?
I'm going to probably do a composite of things on this one. Tony Robbins always says you overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 10 years. I think that's good advice for a startup. It's going to go slower than you imagine at first, but stay the course. I think probably next to risk aversion or risk taking for an entrepreneur, having the capacity to take risk, which is what keeps most people from doing entrepreneurship. I think second to that, probably the most powerful quality is perseverance. Most companies fail, and I think a lot of times it's because they give up too early. Not to say that some don't give up too late, but I think perseverance is probably one of the big ones. The next one is, I would say, hire. Your first hires are critical. Be as diligent and thorough as you can to not make a mistake. Unless you're blitz scaling, like you have a lot of money and you're just throwing it all at this and you want to grow fast to kind of capture market share before competitors catch on. Unless you're doing something like that, I would say, be very critical about who you hire initially as your first, handful of hires that'll make or break you.
That one comes up a lot, actually, is we either get two ends of the spectrum. We either be really, really careful and take as much time as you can with your hiring, or hire quickly. And I do find it interesting because I don't know where the balance is, because it is possible. I've seen people do it. I've probably done it myself in the past, is you just hold out forever for the perfect candidate. And there is no perfect candidate. There never will be.
Right. There's no perfect candidate for sure.
So I guess it's a question of where you draw the line, isn't it, along that?
Yeah, it is tricky. And, a lot of times, we don't want to give up some of our responsibilities as well, right? We don't delegate early enough. So we might withhold and use that as an excuse. I haven't found the perfect person. That's the other thing I say is don't try to find the person that's going to be able to do it 100% as good as you, because nobody will. But if they're 80% as good as you, hire them. Or if they're 80% as good at you at a particular task that you want to, hand off, don't wait till they're perfect at it. Give it to them when they're 80% there and let them be creative with the other 20%. You might be surprised.
Yeah, definitely. Because apart from anything else, even if they only do it 80% or even only 50% as well as you, or they do it in a completely different way, that's fine too, because what's happening there is they're freeing up the 80% of your time.
Right. Exactly. There's a reason we want to offload that particular task, right? And delegate that, especially as you grow.
Yeah. All makes sense to me.
Leadership Heroes.
Well, I've nearly run out of questions. There's only one question left, and it's always my favourite one. It's the only one that I ask every single guest. So hope you're ready for it. Here it is. It's called Leadership Heroes.
Uh-huh.
If you had to pick a person, alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, could be someone you've met, could be someone you haven't, and that person would be, in your opinion, the perfect embodiment of leadership. Who would that person be and why?
So I'm going to throw out 4 names and I'll pick one of them. So I like Tom Bilyeu, obviously Tony Robbins, Elon Musk, and a guy named Patrick Bet-David. And I think I'm going to go, even though I owe Elon for inspiring the framework of the book that I ended up doing. I had the book idea and had a lot of it written, but I was trying to figure out how to frame it. And something he said about first principles was why I wrote the book from first principles, so that, it's going to be technology agnostic. It doesn't matter what your technology stack is. The process will work to help you improve your usage of it. But I'm probably going to go with Patrick Bet-David, mainly because a lot of people may not know who he is. He runs a YouTube channel and a business called Valuetainment. But I think what I like about him is, obviously he's been successful, but he really cares. He shares a lot of information and he doesn't take sides initially. He's really, really good at being objective. And I don't know how he pulls it off, but he really does try to look at every angle of a situation or a scenario in both an optimistic and pessimistic way, and then frame it in as practical a sense as possible. And I think that's an amazing skill set, if it's a set. And, again, the proof is in the pudding, right? He's a very successful businessman, still has time for family. He's a very family-oriented guy, really tries to do well by his people and make them successful as well. And then just shares and shares and shares as much of himself and as much of his thinking as he possibly can. I don't know where he has the time to do all of that. I look at some of the stuff I do on a day-to-day basis, and I just wonder how somebody at, that level running companies that size, can pull off as much as they do. I mean, obviously they use their people well, so that's that. But, I think he's well worth looking into for anyone who's interested in leadership or entrepreneurship or business advice. He's got some great content.
It sounds like an interesting one. I'll add him to my list. Yeah, I mean, being objective it's almost a dying art, isn't it? And I accept the irony of describing objectivity as an art as well.
Yeah, he's really good. He just, especially, I think I first found him during the pandemic, when we were all kind of stuck at home. And he actually really, the way he analyzed the situation with, past pandemics and what that did to the economy and how long it took for the economy to recover. Again, he didn't speculate about a lot of craziness. He just went very practical. Here's this, objective kind of view of the whole situation. Could be different this time, but here's what it's bared out in, historical sense. And here's how it's different now. And what how we might want to think about it. So, and Patrick, if you listen to David's podcast, I would love to buy you lunch one day.
Yeah, so would I, if you're listening. That would be amazing. Awesome. Well, Ross, thank you again so much for your time. I think that the last thing I do at the end is, if you want to point the listeners towards your website or where they can get a copy of your book when it comes out.
Sure. The book that's coming out, I have one chapter in this book called Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 10. And that book has that chapter is an outline of my process, essentially. So you could use that, and in there it's got my email and I think my even phone number might be published in that chapter. But you can I'll send you a free set of the tools that you can then use that framework and the tools to kind of go through your own technology and kind of find some easy low-hanging fruit to save money, and then some ways that you can improve your use of that technology and really get some value out of it and some returns off of it. And then my book is coming out. I may change the title, but it might be Technology Momentum, Systematically Accelerate Your Business 10X. That should be out probably in around June or so. And again, just to reach me, Ross at executiveapex.com is probably the easiest way, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I don't really do a whole lot of other social media, but I do spend quite a bit of time on LinkedIn, and again, I'm available by email, so that's probably the easiest way.
Excellent. And I'll put the links for all of that in the episode description so everyone can find it easily. Thanks again, Ross. It's been great talking to you today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure the listeners have as well.
I appreciate it, David. Thank you.
Ross, thank you again for joining me so early in your day. Really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope the listeners have found it useful as well. Listeners, if you would like to learn more about Ross, what he does, and perhaps get hold of one of his books, I've put his LinkedIn information and email address in the show notes, the episode description, so you can find that and get in touch. If you are a new manager or first-time leader, perhaps you founded a business, and that business or organization where you're working is a tech-driven environment, and you want to improve your leadership, develop your skills, and become a better manager, I have a program for you. I have a few options, in fact, the newest of which is a membership-based group program that would involve monthly leadership focus sessions in which we'll cover a different topic or aspect of leadership every month, monthly group Q&A, and all for a very reasonable monthly fee. It'll be kicking off in the middle of May 2023, so if you're listening to this in the future, you may have already missed it. If you listened to it in the past, good news, it hasn't happened yet. If you would like to learn more, please do reach out. I've put a website link in the episode description and also my LinkedIn profile. The quickest and best way is to reach out to me on LinkedIn, drop me a message and ask for details. As I say, it'll be a monthly membership program, so you can drop in, drop out as often as you like, and you're welcome to keep paying for it for as long as it is useful to you, or stop when it's not. It's all good, and we're very flexible about it. So I hope to see you there, and I hope you'll join us again next week when we'll have another great episode and another excellent guest joining us. In the meantime, stay safe. Do what you can to make sure you're making best use of all your technology. And remember, be a leader, not a boss.